like and you would like to read along this morning, feel free to go ahead and turn to Romans chapter 12 with us. I'll be there in just a little bit. I heard a story this past week of someone in our county that was having to ask or answer, better yet, questions about reading. And it was one that kind of made me laugh. It resembled my earlier years in my relationship with reading things. The question was asked, how do you choose what book is next to read or what book you're going to read next? And the child's answer, I'm sure I am butchering this at some level. I heard it through family members who were kind of laughing and having a good time telling the story. The answer was with a little bit of outrage, it seems. And it said, what book is next? I don't even like to read. I don't want to choose what's next, those sorts of things. And I laugh at that only because my earlier years, because reading was something that was forced to be done. It wasn't something that I learned to do with affection or to enjoy. It was always an assignment. It was always a task to be accomplished so that I could then go do the things that I wanted to do. And honestly, it was way later in my college years that I actually enjoyed the process of reading, because even as I got to school, I can remember first semester going fairly smoothly, but knowing that I was headed into the upper division religion department soon. I walked into the first class by a man by the name of Dr. Dan Sprouse. He pastored a Cumberland Presbyterian church there in town, so he was a practitioner while also teaching us theology, a New Testament scholar. He may not acknowledge that, but I would call him a New Testament scholar. To speak to just how committed he was to teaching the New Testament and many other biblical books and passages, he learned German so that he could read German theologians. Because over the last couple hundred years, the Germans have created some pretty impressive theologians. And so he learned how to read German so that he could learn and read their verbiage in their own language. How about that to commitment to wanting to know your craft well? A lot of respect for that. But as I walked in from a background of reading being an assignment, he walks in and he has a large stack of books. Some of you have heard me talk about this stack of books before because of how intimidating it was in my world when I saw it. The stack of books was measured in feet, not inches. I really don't remember how tall it was, but in my memory, it was probably about this big. But as a preacher, I'll talk about it being, So it's probably about this big, 5, 6 different books that were in there. The last one he held up on the first day of a class called BibX, or as it was really, Biblical Exegesis. The last book he held up was a novel by an individual named Chaim Potok, book written back in the 60s, book called The Promise. He also wrote a couple of others. My Name is Asher Lev. The Chosen was a pretty well-known author for his time. He held up a book called The Promise. It was around 365 pages, but the last thing he said that morning after giving us a bit of a welcome to BibX, the class that, by the way, the old adage is separates the men from the boys. Okay, so I know that's very masculine in tendency, but it communicates. It's that class that if you're not serious about making it in the religion department, you're probably going to drop religion at that point before you make it through BibX. It weeds out the people that aren't serious. And I can remember him holding the book up and saying, it's 360 pages, 365-page novel. I want you to read it, and when you come back to class this time next week, I want 15 pages as a response. And that is to type 15 pages, by the way. Can I tell you what that did to this young man's heart who was not a fan of reading? I can remember walking out thinking, I'm going to be the one that's not going to make it. I am the boy. This is not going to happen for me. I get further on in my reading, and I look at it now as something that I do, unfortunately, very sporadically. I read things in spurts because I enjoy them. I've got a book sitting on my desk, one that's an oldie but a goodie, as they say. Haven't read yet. A friend of mine gave me Mere Christianity. And at some point, I will probably read the thing in a day or so. That's kind of what I do. For some reason, I don't read daily, but when I jump in, I may read 2 or 3 books very, very close together, and I'm probably gearing up for one of those right now. By the end of my college career, though, I remember a 7-week or 7-day period where I had 128 pages of typed assignments due minimum. 128 pages due in 7 days. Now, to you, that may seem like nothing. To me, it was an intimidating task because that meant I had to read numerous books and curriculums in order to write about those. And I'll say at the end of that process, getting toward that junior and senior year, 3 of those critiques, even though I started way early in the process, for me way early, weeks out I was already typing, 3 of those books and curriculums, I only read the table of contents and I wrote 10 to 12 pages about them just by reading the table of contents. Now, some of you are like, couldn't have been any good. Let me tell you, once you've read a certain genre dozens and dozens and dozens of times, you normally can read the table of contents and know what this person thinks about whatever topic you're talking about. I mean, because really the table of contents is something that kind of gives you that overview, if you will. It kind of gives you an idea of what this person is talking about. And if it's a writer who is not very secretive in their table of contents and they flesh out what they're meaning or what they're planning on accomplishing, once you've read a bunch in that specific genre, you kind of know what's going to happen. I remember not saying that I left that class with a 4.0, but making my typical A's and B's after operating that way. Now, one of the things I also learned is that if you're going to read and maybe speed read and fly through, a lot of writers, I could read the first sentence of a paragraph and know really what they were going to talk about. Some of you who are teachers right now are like, oh, Daniel, please don't implant these things inside our children's minds of like, this is how speed reading is done and those sorts. Let me say this. The table of contents will give you an idea of what a book is about. The first paragraph may give you a little bit more about what that book is about. But can we all acknowledge this morning there are enough Christians living their lives in a table of contents? There are enough people reading the first paragraph and not bothering to carry on through the process and know and flesh out what this means. This Romans text is one of these because this past week, if you remember, we started off in this chapter by reading a phrase that is kind of the setting things in tone for the rest of the chapter. Back in Romans chapter 12, at the very beginning, we read this phrase, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." And yet if we would have stopped there, it would have been a very table of contents, a very first sentence way of understanding. And then we jump from that point to realize, if we're going to know how to offer our bodies, we must know the will of God. And Paul starts talking about how to know what God's will is for our life. Incredible lessons learned and what it means to interpret the will of God for our lives. But he doesn't stop there. He continues to flesh things out. And so I'd like to challenge you this morning. If you find yourself in a place where as a believer, you've jumped into the table of contents far too many times, take some time with me and delve a little bit deeper into what Paul's talking about. Don't be satisfied with just getting a general idea. Ask the question with serious intent. What is Paul talking about in this chapter about what it means to live as a offering, as a living sacrifice, offering ourselves back to God? Romans chapter 12, we'll begin this morning's lectionary text for our Sunday, starts in verse 9, and we'll read through verse 20. I'd ask that if you would to stand with me for the reading of the word of the Lord. I'll be reading from the New American Standard this morning. Follow along in whatever translation you may be reading. Love without hypocrisy. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay," says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. God, we come before you this morning reading an incredibly densely packed segment of Scripture. One that is not well accomplished in the table of contents. But God, one that will require of us to work diligently really for the remainder of our lives in order to know what it means and to live out what it means to offer our bodies as living sacrifices. God, this morning as we continue in the words of Paul, would you speak to us clearly even in the midst of a very dense segment of Scripture. We love you and we thank you. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Many of you as kids have had the time before where you were trying to get something to drink, maybe out of a hose or out of a pipe. How many of you call it a hose pipe? Because just doubling up on those words make it even better, right? I don't know why we do that, but we do it. You've probably also been the one that as you were trying to drink from a hose, someone behind you decided to kink that line just a little bit, and slow that trickle down to where you're really having to work to get something to drink out of this hose, thinking that, there must be something. And about the time that you get completely ready, and you're just barely getting that trickle out, someone decides to what? Relieve the pressure, all right? In a lot of ways this morning, the text that we're reading is as if we have leaned in tight to not be the people in the table of contents, and Paul absolutely unleashes. Did you hear all of the verbiage that was used in this, all of the varying segments? Folk, we could spend weeks and weeks unpacking the nature of this densely populated piece of Scripture that we have, and yet this morning we have the task to do so in a short amount of time. And so I would ask that you, as they say, strap in tight, tighten up your boots. We have a good bit of ground to cover. The very first thing that speaks volumes, and it really sets tones in this specific segment of Scripture. Paul jumps out of that having to know how to know the will of God. He jumps into this portion where he talks about love, let love be without hypocrisy, or love without hypocrisy there in the very first in verse 9. Have you ever heard someone say the phrase, for Christ's sake? And I have to be careful how I say that because it could be very easily stated that is using the Lord's name in vain, that we're speaking. But have you ever heard that for Christ's sake statement? I would imagine many of us have. Pardon me for one moment. When we say that, there's actually a bit of literalness to this. And I would ask you the question, are you loving for Christ's sake? Not as the statement that we use as a exclamation of something happening, but are you loving for Christ's sake, or are you loving for your own? Because this phrase of loving without hypocrisy, I want to challenge you this morning that love is a choice. Love is not something you fall into. Love is something you lower yourself step by step into. You may find something that you are immediately and at the very beginning attracted to, and it doesn't just mean of people, but of things. But love is something that you choose to allow yourself to go down the road of. It's something that you allow your mind to take place in, that you, by allowing your mind to be attached to, by falling in love, you're not actually falling, you're just allowing yourself to walk down that road one step at a time, a little bit further and a little bit further. Because love is something that we do, not necessarily because we need someone else. It is something that we choose to be a part of someone else's life. Let's think for just a moment, or for them to be a part of our life. Think with me for just a moment. Does Jesus Christ or God the Father need you to survive? Does He? Does He need you to sustain life? Are you what makes God's life worth living? Absolutely not. And yet God and Jesus exemplify love to us because they choose to love us, not because they need us. Do you see the difference? Because one of the things that we have a little bit of trouble with is if you are loving someone because of what they provide for you, that is not love at all in all actuality. That is commerce. Understand? If you love someone as Christ loved, it is not because of what you will gain out of that. See, love cannot be hypocritical. It's not that we don't need to view it as that. Love cannot be hypocritical because the love of Christ is something that He loves us no matter what we've done. He loves us no matter what mistakes we've made. He doesn't love us because of what we've done for Him. Amen? How many of you this morning are pleased, are absolutely in awe of a God who loves you and you did nothing to deserve that? How many of you need to be reminded sometimes that, you know what? God loves me and I didn't do anything to deserve it. I didn't work for it. I didn't earn it. I didn't attain it. It's not something that I conquered. It is that God loves me simply because He chooses me. So when we read these passages about let love be without hypocrisy, I would go further and say love isn't even love with that sort of transactional based loving. William Barclay, one of the ones many of you know, I read a commentary fairly often when I'm doing especially New Testament work. A gentleman by the name of William Barclay was a great scholar, and he spoke something, or better yet, wrote something very, I thought, just appropriately for this. And he put, Christian love is different from the love of everything else we see. Christian love is cleansed of self. Christian love has been cleansed of self, that you are not loving because of your desire of what you will gain from this, but you are loving because it is something that Christ has compelled, that God has compelled us to do to exemplify Christ-like love, not because we gain, but because it's how God has asked us to live. The problem is we see our relationships so transactional, our marriages so transactional. Let me just speak for a moment on the number one thing I talk to people, counsel people, and deal with in marriages. It is about a need not being met. And if you want a absolute marriage killer, pair my needs are not being met with someone who is not caring for their spouse. You understand this morning that the number one thing that will drive you and your spouse apart is one side not caring for their loved one, not caring for the person that they chose, and the other side focusing on the fact that their needs have not been met. When we get into a world where we're loving because of our needs being met, or we're loving because of a transactional things that we will get out of this relationship, it is not love at all. You have entered a business deal. And it's different. Marriage is not about a business deal. Relationships that we have with each other are not about a business deal. When Paul says love without hypocrisy, it's pointing back to the love of Christ and the way that Christ compels us to live. He goes a little bit further in that same verse and makes this statement of saying, hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Entire sermons and books have been written and spoken about what it means to hate what is evil and cling to what is good. Folks, we're still in verse 9, and the two things that we start with are things that would give us a week's worth of task to operate with. What does it mean to hate what is evil and cling to what is good? To be outraged by it, to be despised by it, to be frustrated by it. How many of you look back at your childhood movies, and for some reason you entertain or are willing to allow more questionable content in movies as you got older than things you did as a younger person as a child? Have you seen how sometimes our being shocked and amazed by things begins to be a bit desensitized to what's taking place around us? When you hear of atrocities in the world around you, are you a person who is outraged by those atrocities, or is it just the next chapter in a long list of atrocities? You understand? Because the more we hear of the outlandish, the crazy, the chaotic, the more we accept that those things are normal in life around us, and we no longer hate what is evil or despise what is evil, but we begin to accept those things as this is just normal. Now, I'm not a proponent of us having some sort of furthered outrage culture. I mean, come on. We have enough outrage on the planet, amen? We got enough things, okay? But in the scheme of sin, it seems too often that we justify one sin to justify another, to expect that this is just how life is done. And all of a sudden, the things that we are allowing to take place in our life right now are an abomination of maybe when we were closer to Christ, living a more Christ-like example. But by giving up short and small instances of ground, we now find ourselves where we don't really hate what is evil, we live amongst it. That makes sense? And in this phrasing, Paul is saying us to consider sin an abomination. Consider those things that separate people from their Creator, that separate the creation from the created. Consider those things the things to be angry with, frustrated by, outraged by. Some of us get so outraged and frustrated by things that are so petty, so short-termed. One of the things that is amazing to me is the continued culture of Facebook, the continued culture of social media, of Twitter accounts, of those sorts of things. That surprise me in the nature of how that continues to kind of spin out and spiral out of control. One of the things that I've learned about it, I've always been curious, why do I not see the things that other people talk about sometimes? You ever wondered that? If you're a social media person, especially in the world of Facebook, I've wondered before, like, why is it that people talk about things that I have no idea what's going on? And then sometimes I do know, but sometimes I don't. And so I started wondering, like, how does this happen? And you hear the conspiracy theories of an algorithm in place. You know what I mean? Like things are put there. And what's been surprising to me is the algorithm that works is one that doesn't give you what it thinks you're going to react to. Have you ever felt like Facebook is conspiring? They're trying to put bad stuff in front of me, you know what I mean? Like I don't know what the deal is, but every time I scroll, you know the algorithm doesn't have it out for you. The algorithm that's put together feeds you what you want. It does. Here's how it works. You pause, you click, you read, you comment, you like. Algorithm is running the entire time, and it knows how long you spent here, how much time you did this, and those things are operating in such a way. One of the most enlightening, but also intriguing, and then also scary, was listening to someone who was in that room of how algorithms are working and how they are written and how those things are accomplished. And the statement was made from that individual who had studied these things for a while. He said, those social media platforms, they don't give you things to rile you up. They give you what you told it to give you. They are a program that will feed you exactly what you want. And if you want to pause and look and click and do all those sorts of things on things that are political, on things that are about football, on things that are about whatever it may be, the algorithm will give you exactly what you want and what you've programmed it to give you. A little bit of a gut check in us is, what has the algorithm decided to give us? Because ultimately, what have we asked it for? What have we wanted it? And it's hard for us to say this, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, when maybe those things that are ultimately divisive, sinful in nature, those things that are antagonistic to the Christ-like example we want to live, when they populate our feed, it is because we have asked it to. I wonder sometimes what things need to be changed about our lives and the way we operate so that it gives us the better sides of life. If there were an algorithm to give us the better sides of life, is it because we've asked it to instead of it is attacking us? I know some of you are time-conscious type people, and you realize that we're in verse 9 and just getting into verse 10 of a pretty long passage, and you're going, I didn't even bring lunch. I get it. There's a great deal of things said in this passage, and we won't be able to spend our entire time there. A couple of verses that jump out at me just as densely packed and difficult to work through, things that are hard sometimes to exemplify. Give preference to one another and honor, verse 10 reads. Verse 14, bless those who persecute you. Verse 15, rejoice with those that rejoice. Weep with those who weep. If you have your cell phone this morning, would you get it out for me? Just do me a favor. Go ahead. And I know some of you are like, I just told my kids, put that phone up. I get it. Okay, just play the game with me for just a moment, all right? If you got your phone with you, go into calls, however that looks on your phone. And then from calls, go back into recents, all right? Recent calls. I'd like for you to kind of scroll through maybe the top 10, maybe 15 people that you've called, and I would like for you to remember what the nature of that phone call was about. I think this is a great kind of polling opportunity because we could do this with text messages as well. So if you're there, either one works. If you're more of a text person, probably need to jump over into the world of text, whatever your icon is. But I want you to look back at the recent conversations and ask the questions, what were those conversations about? What was the reason for that call? Was it a call of rejoicing that something happened and you wanted to call and say, hey, that's awesome, I'm glad for you, hope things are going well, I heard something awesome happened, was it maybe a birthday or something that took place? Were there some of them that you knew? Some of you probably have in your recent call log that you have contacted either Bev Nolan or Ginger Fazell over the last few days because they lost their father after many years of caring for him. And so maybe you called to mourn with them. Some of those you'll look back at, though, and you'll see maybe there was something that you needed. It was a question answered. It was something that you were after to accomplish, something that you needed so that you can continue to move forward. And I guess my question for you, and it stays in line with this, even some of the social media things we talked about. If you were to look back at the phone calls that you've made over the last couple of days, where did you rejoice with those that were rejoicing? Where did you weep with those who weep? Thus exemplifying loving as Christ loved humankind? Where are those phone calls and how often are they? Is it something that you spent your time over the last week calling to have your needs met? Or did you spend time calling in the nature of rejoicing with people and weeping with people? And maybe this next week, as we work to become more Christ-like as we read this in Paul, maybe we very intentionally, when we find out something has happened in someone else's life, we call to congratulate them. When we find out that our friends are not well and are facing a virus that we have no idea what will happen in their future, maybe it is in acknowledging the uncertainty instead of asking, and because he's made it public, I'll speak openly about it. Instead of asking, I wonder how our county mayor, or better yet, the man I go to church with, I wonder how James Bridges is doing today. I wonder how his family's doing. Instead of asking your friends, I wonder how he's doing, we rejoice with those who rejoice, we weep with those who weep, and we pick up the phone and we call the people that we're worried about. That's what this is about. It's not about the talking amongst. It's rejoicing with them, being present, being involved, and something that likely we all need to be challenged a bit with. In verse 18 and verse 19, we read this passage of, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. When possible, verse 19, be at peace with all men. Let me tell you a little saga about the carpet that's been taking place down here. I'm happy to tell you that the stage is 80% either in place and or glued down. Somebody say amen. You know, we're looking forward to being back in our sanctuary. Beautiful place, don't get me wrong. Ready to be back in the sanctuary. Pastor Jeremy and I, whenever that takes place, have a week ahead of us getting all of the things that we have added to make Zoom and all the platforms that we operate and that we broadcast from. We got to transplant all that in the sanctuary. It'll be a good week when we get all that up and running. But I look forward to joining back in the sanctuary. In the carpet process so far, I have tried to work diligently so that no one is waiting on ECN to accomplish that task. You know what I mean? Like staying ahead of it. If you're in business, you know what it means to stay ahead of things so that people aren't waiting on you in order for something to be accomplished. So when it came time for the carpet to arrive, when the question is asked, hey, we're coming by at such and such time, the door will be unlocked when you get there. You understand? Because I don't want somebody showing up here with a carpet delivery and then finding out that, oh, the doors aren't locked. And then the worst case scenario is what? They leave with our carpet. You know what I mean? So you got to stay in front of those things. Do you read in this passage where it says, be at peace with all men as it depends on you? That there is this, as it depends, or as it is reliant upon you to be at peace with all men. In the same way that in our business sense sometimes, we always want to be the one who is waiting on the next step. You understand? We're the one waiting. We don't want to live in such a way that people are waiting on us to move forward. And what a challenge Paul gives us and what it means to even live at peace. Be the one where it's not dependent upon you. Be the one who is ahead of that process. Be the one who has taken that step already and not the one who's being waited on. A lot of times in our world today, there is the expectation of other response instead of our own. Verse 19 continues on and says, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Some of us this morning should feel a bit of relief in that you know what? As much as there is talking in a world of judgment and burdens and punishments and those sorts of things, we're able to be a place at peace because we're believers. That God has the ultimate say in how things go. That removes some of our need to bring about discipline. There's so much in this passage that I'll be honest, this morning, as I prepared this past week for this morning's message anyway, the thoughts of what to speak about, of how to move forward. Where is this applicable in our lives? Which portions of this passage will we spend our time focusing on? And so taking a few of the selections and moving through when there's incredibly more to digest. And I wondered, where does this fit the most appropriately, the most illustrative into the life that we're living right now? It probably fits the best into those of us who have kids. Some of you have been in a couple of weeks that is different from any other week in parenting or grandparenting that you've ever been a part of. There are choices to be made in that process. You've had the difficulty of knowing and working through how to adapt to both home life, work life, educational processes, all of those sorts of things. And as we read these passages about what it means to love, what it means to be people of peace, one of the things that concerns me the most in our differences is that we resort back to a form of tribalism. You know what tribalism means? We try to find out who's on our team, who's fighting on the same side that we're fighting on. And so we throw out lines to find out who's on our side. We throw out lines to find out, who agrees with us so that we can have camaraderie and maybe even be louder and those sorts of things. And as we see that unfold, you gotta go back to some of the tense places in our lives, whether it is the tension of what our immediate system is in right now, or maybe things that nobody in this room even knows that you're going through, and ask the question, how do I best offer myself as a living sacrifice, loving without hypocrisy, working toward peace, making sure that I rejoice with people who rejoice and mourn with people who mourn? And how do I do that in the midst of struggles, frustrations, things that we're doing in our daily life that even haven't been preceded before? I'm a firm believer that we have options every time we face some sort of adversity, some sort of a frustration that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, it probably won't be known for years how we dealt with it. I think, unfortunately, we don't have the chance to do this now. But in 20 years, when we ask our kids, what was it like when the virtual switch had to be flipped? When that decision, for the sake of health and the concerns that people may not do well, when that decision was made and that switch was flipped, what was that like for you? It may be because of the way we've lived in front of our kids that our kids resuscitate, or I should say, recite, is better verbiage there, that they recite that it was chaos and frustration. Or maybe they look back and they see, I saw my parents work through something that was a challenge, whether they were a home educator or one in the school system teaching and trying to learn a new system themselves. That I saw my parents in the midst of frustrations exemplify love without hypocrisy, peace with all men, rejoicing and mourning together. But I saw my parents work through something and it set a tone in my life. It's an easy target right now because it's the biggest in our local discussion of things. But my guess is this morning, those same principles apply to the things that you are dealing with in your life, at your work, in your home, within future things that you're dealing with. And I wonder, how do the words of Paul challenging us to love without hypocrisy, to be people of peace, to be people who rejoice and mourn together, how does that speak into your life? And hopefully this morning the Holy Spirit is revealing that. God, we come before you this morning, many of us from different walks of life and many of us from different perspectives. And yet this morning, the unifying thing that we have together, God, is that we want to be Christ-like examples to the people around us. We want to know how to navigate difficult situations well. We want to know and we want to live out, not just in our heads of head knowledge, God, but we want to know how to live out a love without hypocrisy. Being people who are a people who work to accomplish peace. A people who know what it means to rejoice from the mountaintops with those that are rejoicing and to mourn in the valleys with those who are mourning. From whatever perspective we may be looking at things this morning, from whatever frustrations may be going on in our life, from whatever things we may be facing, God, would you help us to operate within those with a Christ-like example, so that even though things may be difficult, God, that we may find ourselves learning how to be more Christ-like even in the midst of difficulties. May your Holy Spirit this morning, God, speak to us and challenge each of us in the chairs that we sit in and the lives that we represent. And may we leave this place being challenged to be more Christ-like each and every day. We love you and we thank you. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.